So welcome to Virtual Church on Saturday the 24th of October. Great to have you here with us. It is the last one in our series on the Beatitudes. So if you have any thoughts about themes that you would like to see Virtual Church cover, things that have been on your heart, or things you'd like to explore in and reflect on a bit more, please do get in touch. Plenty of space in comments on Facebook if you're following on that. Or of course on WhatsApp for anything that you want to say. That goes for suggestions about music as well. I've noticed I'm putting in a lot of Graham Kendrick stuff, which shows that a good part of my Christian development happened in the 1980s with Spring Harvest and all those sort of things happened. Not they're not absolute classics, of course they are. Well, our last beatitude was blessed are the peacemakers, and here we are. But Chaz and Dave seem to be getting on really well once more, so at least that one worked. Today's is a little bit more somber, I'm afraid, as we look at the beatitude in which Jesus says, blessed are those who are persecuted. How can that be? Let's have a read of it for you today. So Jesus says, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's one of those upside down ones, isn't it? Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the unhappy, for they shall be happy. It seems very strange. Blessed are you when everybody hates you and turns against you and doesn't want you and would like to get rid of you. That doesn't sound like happiness at all. So once again, we see that this is part of that upside downness, that reversal of values that we have when Jesus contrasts the values of the kingdom of heaven with the values of life as it's often lived around us and what we really want in life. It's interesting that Jesus tops and tails the Beatitudes, all 8 of them, with this phrase, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So the opening one says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, blessed are the persecuted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I guess he's trying to say that these all come as one package, and actually from beginning to end, all the way through, they're about the kingdom of heaven, what it means to live in the kingdom, and particularly to live like its king. Because Jesus doesn't ask us to do anything he's not prepared to do himself. So when he talks about being persecuted because of righteousness, well, look what happened to him. He came to stand for God, to speak out for God, to share God's salvation and redemption, and he was sent to the cross for it. In fact, he picks up on this in the next couple of verses. This is the one he comments on, and maybe it's because he thinks this is one that's really hard for us to get. How can it be a blessing in any form to be persecuted? He goes on to say, blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets that were before you. So it's interesting that he says, because of me there. He said earlier, blessed are those who persecute because of righteousness. Now he says, because of me, because I've come to bring God's righteousness, a deeper kind of righteousness than just the one where you try to make out that you yourself are so righteous that you're doing God a favor, that you're earning a place in the kingdom. But now he says it's because of me, this salvation that he's come to bring. And he says that the prophets walked this same way. So he's saying, looking back, that the prophets in some way were looking ahead to the coming of Jesus, and that Jesus looks back to fulfilling the things that they came to do. This becomes very explicit in some of his parables. For example, remember the parable of the tenant, just to take one of them, where the landowner builds a vineyard and he puts everything into it. He's very careful to do everything really nicely, digs over the soil, he makes a wine press in it so the grapes can be turned into wine, those that are used for that. He puts a wall around it, really looks after it. Then he lets it out and goes to a far country. But then it's harvest time, and he sends servants to just get his share from the tenants of what the vineyard has produced. He's put a huge amount of effort into getting this vineyard really great. And it says that they rejected the servants, they beat some of them, they stoned some, they killed some of them. And these are things that happened to the prophets. And then he says finally, the landowner thinks to himself, I'll send my son, they'll respect him. So Jesus comes as the Son, in the line of the prophets, but taking it to a new dimension. And we all know what happens to him. So Jesus doesn't ask us to do anything he's not prepared to do himself. He's been there. We said, didn't we, as we went through the Beatitudes, that in some way they're a portrait of who Jesus is and what he'd come to do. And this is what's happened to him. He was rejected and despised. Rumours were spread about him. And finally, people decided they'd had enough of him and got rid of him. And that's when the blessing comes in. We've also been saying of the Beatitudes, yes, they seem upside down, and that's because it's God who gives the blessing. It doesn't come from the situation being so wonderful. It's quite the opposite in many cases, because it's God who wants to bless his people, wants to bless you. And he shows that blessing in the story of Jesus, because after Jesus is crucified at the hands of sinful men, God raises him from the dead. And that's the picture, I think, of Christian blessing. In fact, it's the dynamic by which Christians grow at all. It's the twin poles that energize Christianity, of death and resurrection. After the cross comes new life. After putting to death the things that stand between us and God, then the resurrection presence of Jesus comes bursting through. And that's the blessing, really, behind all these Beatitudes. They're actually picturing for us in one way or another the death and resurrection of Jesus, and saying that part of the kingdom is to live in the power of his cross and his rising from the dead. Well, one of the things that was said in the early days of Christianity is that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, and it was a very difficult thing for the authorities that were around in the time of the Roman Empire, that the more they seemed to try and batter down Christianity, because they wanted the emperors to be worshipped so that they could have a stable society. They didn't really care whether anyone believed it or not, but they wanted people to conform to the practice as a statement about cohesive values for society, and therefore they couldn't have people coming along and saying that actually these are false gods that can't save you. And they persecuted the Christians endlessly. And the more they did it, the more the Christian faith grew. I think this is because it really matters to you. If your Christian faith might be a matter of life and death, or if it might involve putting your livelihood on the line because you might lose your job over it, or you might be thrown into prison because of it, your family might be threatened, well, then you're going to make pretty sure that you know what you're doing. And it's the quality of the Christian life, then, that comes from people who really do love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, because they've had to make some terrible choices to follow Christ. It really, really matters to them. And sometimes it doesn't matter as much to us in our society where we can be comfortable, maybe just possibly sometimes a little bit too comfortable. Yes, there are people who are a bit rude about us, people who want to call us bigots, people who think we're narrow-minded, but people who think we're irrational and we don't want to have anything to do with reason because we think life is about just believing things because we want to believe them, and ignore the incredible Christian legacy of the great Christian scientists who actually led to the rise of science in our country, and the amazing Christian social reformers whose passion for Jesus actually led them to end slavery, to reform prisons, to stand up against discrimination of all kinds. So that's unfortunate, but it's nothing compared to what Christians have gone through at some times in history, and to what they are still going through in some parts of the world. Persecution is starting to rise again in China. The Chinese authorities are pulling down crosses off churches and taking other steps to suppress the Christian faith at the moment. And I think another era of persecution may begin there soon. But there are thought to be over 100 million Christians in China. And it does seem that once again, the gospel has thrived when it's officially discouraged, and when there are challenges involved for those who want to follow Christ. It really matters for them. Well, one of our churches, St Andrew's, has actually wanted to do something about this and has signed up to follow Open Doors. If you'd like to find out more about Open Doors, what's really happening to Christians in different countries around the world at the moment, and the work that they're doing to try and alleviate the struggles of our brothers and sisters, well, you can go on their website. It's very good, lots of information there. And there's also an interview. Go back quite a long way now into the annals of virtual church, and you'll find an interview with Eddie, our local rep for Open Doors, and you'll get some interesting perspectives from him. I think we should end now by praying for the persecuted church in different parts of the world. Lord, you said, blessed are those who are persecuted. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We thank you for our brothers and sisters around the world who are prepared to pay a heavy price for following you because they love you. Please help them to be bold and confident in you, but also help us in our more comfortable life here in Great Britain, in the West, and not to be too comfortable, to remember those who pay a great price, and also to be devoted to you ourselves. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. So maybe part of the blessing on those who are persecuted, as on the other blessings, is to know who you are as a Christian, someone loved by God, that Jesus himself has borne persecution because he loves us so deeply, that the Father has set such a high price on us that he's given his Son. And I wonder if that's something that we can take into our own situations, and that will be strength and help to us and blessing to us when we face harder times. Just a couple of notices. Thank you to everyone who's supported the Zimbabwe Appeal and who's donated to help families who are going hungry in our link parish at St John's, Gwelachana. It's wonderful to see people being kind and generous in that way. And the second is, don't forget that clocks go back tomorrow morning, especially if you're one of those who feels confident to come to open church, where you don't want to arrive when no one else is there because they're all enjoying their extra hour in bed. So watch out for that one. And until we meet again at the next virtual church, God bless you and see you really soon.